shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's sink or swim, only option is to win. In the murky water, not a thought of giving in. Welcome to the shrimp tank. Want to put it all together. This is big things. Doing big things. Chasing big dreams. Yeah, it's all real. This life's all that it seems. All the chicks scream. All the dudes yell. This is just what I do and I do it well. With the flow fresher than the new shoe smell. Going through hell, but homie, keep going. You know the saying, you gon' reap what you sow in. So I don't chase girls. I just chase dreams. Play the same game, but we ain't in the same. Running a campaign, Roadie 2016. Like a phone to die, putting me in charge. I'm a general from the front, I'ma lead the charge. Like a federal, fell on my lap never. Going hard as ever.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank powered by Celsius Beverage. If this is your first time tuning in, we now go live at Shrimp Tank Boca on our Instagram account, our Facebook account, our YouTube account, and of course the FAU Adams Center Facebook account as well. Every week we're joined with some of the best and brightest entrepreneurs from South Florida, of course, finding the do's and don'ts of running a business. You know, there's so many ups and downs. We can see the market's very shaky last week and people are fearful, right? And running a business, you got to be careful, right, of what's to come on the horizon, right? We saw this during COVID and people really pivoting, and the go-getters figured it out. Isn't that correct, my co-host Kevin Cox?
Yeah, absolutely. So things are still a little bit slow here around FAU, but a lot going on and tons on the horizon. I just went to graduation yesterday, which is always fun to get dressed up and sit around and witness all the...
Getting dressed up is fun? I feel like I haven't put on a suit in like 4 years.
Well, no, it's not that kind of dressed up. You get the gown and the silly hat.
Oh,
it's like a costume for graduation. So yeah. You know, it's really great to see so many of our students successfully graduating from both the undergraduate College of Business and our MBA program. It's 100 graduates, a lot of excited students. So that's always kind of a nice time of year. We have 3 graduations here at FAU, fall, spring, and summer. I go to summer because it tends to be the shortest, but it's a great experience for our students, and we'll be back into session here shortly.
Okay, so it's event season coming up, right? With the fall, like everything slows down in Florida in the summertime. People take off a lot of time on vacation, just like I recently did, and they come back really excited to wrap up the year and have a good last quarter. So you see a lot of folks going to networking events. You see a lot of big events, like I know I'm doing some with South Florida Tech Hub. They have this big event called Tech Palooza. They're going to go from 1,000 to 5,000 attendees at the Broward Convention Center. But what do you see on the horizon locally here in the Boca area and FAU area?
Oh yeah, we've already got events. You mentioned South Florida Tech Hub. Just last week, we had the Golden Palms Gala downtown West Palm at the Kravis Center, which was a wonderful event where a lot of the people in the community were recognized for their impact. So events are already on their way. We'll have the Maverick reception during Global Entrepreneurship Week. That I imagine will be exciting and probably also ignite Florida, but just a ton of stuff coming down the horizon, and we may even have some sharks on the campus.
Sharks in the shrimp tank. I think that's what you're saying. With our new studio coming up, we were talking about for like a year now, right? That might be that little inch that we need to kind of get them to come in, of course.
Yeah. And we'll need all the money too, the bags and bags of it also.
Hey, you never know. You just got to ask sometimes. That's the thing in business. So often, you know, people don't ask, and of course the answer is always no, but sometimes you ask 100 times, and one of those times it's not about the money. They'll just say, sure, that looks cool, I'll get back to the students. But it's hard, right? Because some of them get asked consistently, especially college campuses, to come in and talk, and eventually, you know, it's very difficult, of course. Well, let's get into our guest today. We got Scott Logvin in the studio. He is the president and co-founder of Barkera. If you're watching online, you can see all this awesome stuff that he's laid out on our podcast table. And he's also the president of Liquid PC. And he's also a mentor over at the Nova Levant Center of Innovation. We're big fans of them. John Wensveen has come on our show, and we do a lot of collaborations with their center as well. So Scott, welcome to the Shrimp Tank. To start things out, let's just talk about your background. You know, how did you get going as an entrepreneur, those early days, and how did you go from Liquid PC, which you're still operating, to what we see on this table right now, Barkera?
That's great. And thank you for inviting me to this session. So early on in my younger days, I had a good mentorship from family, friends. My father owns a couple businesses as well. And when I started, unfortunately or fortunate, however you want to look at it, I'm an only child. So growing up in Buffalo, New York, when it's snowing outside, what do? You stay inside. And typically I was in the basement and figuring out I got to keep myself busy. So I took apart the toaster ovens, figured out how to make things. And at an early age, I would say the first track record I made was inventing a product called Mini-Matic when I was in 5th grade to clean baseboards. In baseboards in the north, people usually know them because they're oak, very nice. South, not so much. But
That's an interesting invention, by the way. Being a young individual, you're like baseboards. Like,
yes.
How did you go down that road? Like most people want to do like remote control cars, like baseball cards, like something really interesting.
I bet I could
baseboards.
I bet I could speculate a guess. It sounds like that might have been on his list of chores at the house.
Ooh, this is true.
Maybe he got tired of doing it the old-fashioned way. How was it?
So that the old saying is that a seasoned entrepreneur, business folk is there to solve problems, right? Partly, that's true. When you have a chore and you don't want to do it, you got to figure out a way to get out of it. My parents wouldn't make it easy necessarily for me to get out of the chores. However, I saw my mother painstakingly on her hands and knees cleaning these baseboards, with pledge and, the little cloth. So my grandfather, my mother's father, had that typical workshop in the basement, and that's really what sparked it. Because he was the kind of person that instead of going out and buying something, he would just figure out how to build it or use household materials to do it. And that's what cultivated this product. I won a winning first place in New York State and 13th in the United States, K through 12. And that was the first spark of innovation, I would say. The trajectory of that, not to use the whole episode on my background, but the trajectory is that, at the age of 13 is when I first started to make my first buck, running a lawn business, typical, up north. But at the age of 15, I started a guitar business. And because I know that in my generation, metal bands were a big deal. Everyone had to be in the band. So none of my friends could afford guitars, and one of my cousins owned a musician shop in Buffalo. So I learned how to build these guitars, electric guitars. Before you know it, I had 500 guitars in my basement. I was doing all the musicians' flea markets at the age of 16, traveling the country. So it was always in my blood to kind of take that path per se, and then listen to those that could give me advice along the journey. And it's been, glorious, and I made my way down in South Florida in 1999 and then, joined Citrix and I figured what was missing is the corporate side. So
why did you go down the corporate lane? Right. Often we see entrepreneurs that having fun, doing guitars. I mean, that was an amazing time, right? 80s and 90s,
right.
The Metallica days, AC/DC days. And like you went and got a job with Citrix. Like why would you do that to yourself? Right.
Yeah. So from the guitars to Citrix, there was a couple of little steps in the mix, right? So I worked for Jim Beam Worldwide. I had a couple other elements that still stayed into that entertainment type of industry. And I actually went to school. Originally, I came actually here at FAU to look at their film program because I wanted to go into film special effects. And I wound up taking a completely different course on the educational side, but I was involved in the .com days. So I brought to South Florida web conferencing. And I used to work for a company called Evoke, located off of Cypress Creek. And, we were in a pre-IPO, build a 400-person sales team in less than 4 months and 27 offices in the country. And it was very aggressive. And if you played in the .com days, you would, people understand that because technology was almost non-existent. And you would go
when you say the .com days, what year are we talking about?
Late 90s, early 2000s.
Well, there's a big difference between the two, isn't there? There's something right in the middle there.
Yeah, well, I mean, when it became, I would say, this could be a deep discussion here, and I see where you're going on it. But when you walk into somebody's office and you talk about technology and they kick you out of the office, that's what I call the .com days. And that was happening in the early 2000s. you would walk into an office and say, I have this great product. It's called web conferencing, and you can display a PowerPoint. And they're like, no, I'd rather use a Bell South or AT&T phone bridge and dial up. So that was not necessarily an easy thing to introduce to a market, and especially the big players like Tupperware and Ryder and Citrix and so forth. So, but it was exciting, and you had to understand essentially how to sell air and build solutions and beat out big traditional giants in the industry in order to evolve something that actually today we take for granted. We use it every day, right? Zoom and so forth. But that time that I spent there helped cultivate early on technology days and also learning management systems, which were also non-existent. Web-based training and video training back in early 2000s was very expensive online. What we take for granted is YouTube today, which we're on right now, right? So this evolved, and when I got approached by Citrix, the educational division there was essentially struggling. They did certification training, and the executive said, hey, we need somebody to come in and help modify this division and change it both on the sales, marketing, and technical side. So to answer your question, I knew that as a seasoned business individual, that I lacked some of the corporate structure. And I knew that I wanted to spend a couple of years of my life at least evolving and playing in that sandbox to understand it better, because that inevitably would be somebody you'd sell to.
I like that you're bringing this up, because today we live in a generation where everything's online on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn. Everyone says they could ignore going to a corporate 500 Fortune 500 company, or just get that foundation and that experience. And I see it all the time. A lot of early on startups go out of the gate, and they have a lot of failures early on because their ego is in their way. They think they know it all, and they think on everything they see online is the real business. And I'm big on etiquette, right? Like an example would be like, setting up this podcast, like the amount of emails you receive, the detail on the emails, even parking. And I think lots of times early startups don't see all that because they never worked for a big brand. They don't understand healthcare, 401k, and just how to treat employees the correct way, and how etiquette is really done behind the scenes. We talked about wearing a suit earlier. Like I joked about not putting on a suit in a while, but it's different because I've been in a corporate environment, and I was a financial advisor at 23 years old, and if I didn't wear a tie to that office, people looked at me like, what the hell are you doing? Like, go down to TJ Maxx and go buy a tie and come back up, literally. And I had to do that a few times.
Right.
And just you learn, to call people when you're late. You learn proper etiquette, like dear Mr. or Mrs. Smith, even though you want to say dear Jane.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They just taught you, all the fundamentals of business and etiquette and just structure. Because a lot of times people say, like, why do these companies do this? They move like dinosaurs. It's like, well, they're publicly traded, and they can't exactly go ahead and go on all these different podcasts, speak their mind, because it come back to really haunt them.
That's right.
Right. And you learn that through these big corporations. And I really like that you said that you were missing that, because a lot of times people ignore that and their ego gets in the way. Right. And they just say, no, I could do it all myself. Do you agree, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. But let's fast forward to today. I saw from various sources, you did a good job on the digital marketing. You hosted a fantastic event recently. So what is Barkera? Tell us about it. Maybe your event as well, but what's the company all about?
Yeah, so to segue into that, and I do want to make a point just to touch on the corporate piece, because I think it is important for those that listen and those that are going through the entrepreneurial journey, regardless if you're a student or a professional. You do get that corporate structure, and it is important because at the end of the day, every business has the same foundational components: sales, marketing, operation, HR, legal, accounting. So to understand that and to understand how to build a company properly, and like I said in the beginning, I coined the phrase enterprise bootstrap startup. We focused at Barkera building out the company's foundation first, before we even thought about building out the products and services, knowing that we're going to go after an industry. So Barkera is essentially, I've been in lots of industries with my, former or current, tech company that's called Liquid UPC. That has allowed me to essentially understand different industries, because you're working with different industry professionals and you're helping them out with their digital strategy from beginning to end. And you're essentially seeing that there's this commonality no matter what industry you're in, but you need that foundation. So the challenge I had is that, COVID COVID, hit all of us in different ways, but I did launch a travel company pre-COVID. We can pretty much say how that went. Took a couple years of investment and then essentially shut it down because it just simply wasn't,
Yes, bad timing.
Yeah, bad timing and something you can't control, right? So and as an entrepreneur, that hurts. It hurts a lot. When I was talking to Barbara, who's my better half, she's been in the veterinary space for over 30 years, and every day she's coming home and talking about the pet owner. She's talking about the pet owner being confused when they go to their trusted advisor, their vets, because that's really where you go. If you have an animal, you're going to always run to the vet if because the animal can't talk. And she's talking to me about it, and we're going into it, and I'm kind of at a point where, as you get older, you're looking for things that are more fun to do and things that excite you. And I said, I really like the pet industry, but I just don't want to build the tchotchke product. Nothing wrong with it, but I'm not about that money piece. I'm more about the foundational piece. My team did a bunch of research, and as we understood that the pet industry is blowing up, of course, especially pre-COVID, which was pets are essentially COVID proof because more people had pets in that time than ever in history. The problem is that the system itself, which is the services and the companies like groomers, trainers, breeders, veterinarians, shelters, and rescues, they're all fragmented. And when they're fragmented, they're not working together. And essentially what happens is there's a cyclical problem where pets get involved in the family, but the journey is kind of empty and it's a guest journey. You're kind of guessing on how you should raise this animal. There's no kind of book or guide or resource to do that. My generation would look at this as a dog. It's a man's best friend. The younger generation looks at it as their fur baby. It's their child. They also have the device, so they're doing a lot more research. And with research, there's good and bad, right? The good news is that there's a lot more content out there today. The bad is that there's a lot more influencers that may be doing right or wrong, but you don't know that, and you're getting information from sources that essentially you're making decisions on your pet's life that could be good or bad decisions. So Barkera started to create, and the methodology of Barkera is about proactive and preventative pet care, covering all four bases of health, grooming, behavior, and nutrition. And the way we look at it is that we're a neutral platform where we source industry experts. So we go after the biologists, the scientists, the people that typically you would never hear on the internet, but the ones that are actually putting the science behind the trajectory of the healthcare system. We go after those folks that have the right credentials to essentially be the trusted advisor and disseminate content. And that content would be disseminated through multiple mediums, either through, mediums like this, like a book. But most of our mediums are digital, of course, because I'm a tech guy.
So explain the digital a tad more. So are you talking about like Zoom meetings, group meetups, for example, one-on-one sessions, a forum online? Kind of explain it a tad more.
So Barkera, the vision of Barkera is a movement, and the movement is unite both experts and pet owners, of which we call an elevator pet owner, is a person that's interested in doing right on their pet, from whatever right is based on their lifestyle. And our goal is really to go after the industry at a whole, but complement those that are in the industry. So complement the veterinarians, the breeders, the groomers, trainers, and even, the bigger institutions like the Petcos and Chewies, because there's a gap of education that exists there. And when you go to the pet store, guess what? You have a $15 an hour person recommending the nutrition for your dog that has absolutely no experience whatsoever, but they're the ones that you essentially go to as naively as a pet owner in some cases. So what we want to do is we want to be there as that trusted advisor through the pet owner's journey, and the platforms that are going live in digital at the end of this year and early 2025 is what we call the Barkera ecosystem. The ecosystem comprises of private communities. So that would be something that's similar to like a Facebook, where you could talk to industry experts in those communities, or like the OWL platform, where you have that one-to-one verbal conversation. That would be a great complement, all the way down to directories. And we have multiple learning management systems that deliver, either on-demand on-demand content or live content based on that owner's objectives.
All right, so let's talk business. We are here in the Boca Raton Shrimp Tank. So Everybody expects content to be free, coming from AIs, coming from all over. So how does this make money? Is it a referral business model or a membership model where maybe you don't give away all the content for free? Tell us about the business side of Barkera.
So we do have some free communities, as expected, out there on the standard social platforms today that are growing at a pretty mass rate. And these platforms are moderated by typically 10 to 30 different industry experts, helping out answer pet owner questions for free on demand. What that does is that builds out that community, for in the future, we will create a conversion off of that. Now, the business model itself on the content piece, when you look at it, is subscription-based, business model where you access the community, and then within that community, you have other resources that you may get, like either courses that you're either paying for or not, because not every pet owner has the same objectives, right? And not every pet owner has the same breeds or goals. That some pet owners might have an advanced breed like a Cane Corso, which is a 120-pound Mastiff. Some owners might have a simple, breed like a Doberman or a Chihuahua. I don't want to say they're simple, but they're basically smaller breeds that are more manageable in some cases. So for us, the core business model of the content distribution piece is on a subscription side. The way that Barkera is formulated is, from a visionary perspective, is to have sub entities of the company that are focused on different parts of the business. So, for example, we're going to be offering a formaldehyde test kit. What is that? Why would we offer that? Well, one of our currently developing partners is a chemist that has been able to identify that formaldehyde in the household, which emits from your floors, laminate floors, all your cabinetry and so forth, things like that are very new science. And this science is not been rolled out very well, right? As far as from a veterinary perspective. So you as a pet owner go to your vet, your dog is very sick and your dog's not breathing right, or you're not even breathing right. And when you go to the doctor, your vet, you're simply having the question of like, hey, what's going on here? The typical response is it's an airborne allergy from something outside, or it's a nutritional based allergy that's, coming from what you're feeding yourself and the animal. The reality is no one ever accounts for that. It could be the odors emitting from your floor. And of course, your animals are laying on the floor all day long. So that would be a good example of a sub outlet of a company that we're going to be forming that services that particular niche. And these companies we have would be led by different industry professionals over time, because essentially they're somewhat different business models is the best way to explain it.
Yeah. I bet I'm familiar with another example that you probably know as well. And that's a good friend, and I'm part of her advisory team here at Tech Runway, Andrea with EpiPause.
Andrea, so shout out to Andrea. So Andrea, EpiPause, epigenetic scientist, actually was one of our speakers on the Friday event. Our past Friday event that came up, cultivated pets and healthcare in the pet industry and AI. So it had a mixture of tech and health in one. And what we basically discussed was the industry as a whole, kind of the problems and the forecasted future of the industry with the shortage of vets. If there's going to be a shortage of vets and there's an increase of pet population, what are you going to do? Right. Yeah. So we talked about how technology needs to play a role to complement that and create efficiency. Andrea talked about the genetics piece of it. Prior to her, we talked about the blood analyzers that are out there that are going to be moving more to virtual vets and mobile vets in the United States. But she's great. She's a seasoned growing entrepreneur as well. And she was one of actually my cohort students at the Broward Center of Innovation.
Nice.
Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from one of our sponsors. And we get back, we're going to jump into our What's Hot segment of the show.
Join the fastest growing community of professionals on the internet with OWL. Access new networks and otherwise unreachable professional contacts through the one-on-one call feature on the app. Scroll through the list of available professionals and join them for a quick call to build rich connections, expand invaluable relationships, and to broaden your professional landscape without needing lofty referrals. OWL. We bring vetted pros to your doorstep 24/7 on demand. Join our community by signing up at owl.com today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank. That was the Owl commercial, and how cool is this? Scott will be our featured expert next week on the app, and you could call him one-on-one and chat about anything we were discussing during today's episode. Talk about collaborations like he was just mentioning with some other local partners down here in South Florida. Meet with him for coffee, whatever. Just call him on the Owl app and go from there. So Scott, this segment is called What's Hot. So I'm going to bring up a question or two and just dive into why it's hot. Okay, so let's talk about earlier you were saying that there's going to be more pets and less vets. So when it comes to less marriage, right? Like obviously more people are going to go and get pets, right? And I see Kevin looking at me. He's like, "Where are you going with this? What's hot question? No way out of this, Kevin." But what are hot?
Here we go. Here we go.
So I'm back in the shrimp tank. I'm not used to this segment anymore. I've taken 10 weeks off. Look, there's a beep going on in the afternoon over here. What's going on?
Just checking. Make sure
But
nothing.
I guess what are hot ways for people to get pets these days, right? You see a lot of people going down adoption, right? You see a lot of people, wanting that perfect cat because they could, or dog that they could post on social media. And I know there's two different theories here, and there's going to be such a large amount of pet owners in the future with the low marriage rates. Kevin's laughing at me. What's going on, Kevin? I wasn't that bad. I got out of it.
What's a hot way to get pets?
What's a hot way to get pets?
Okay, take it away. That's all you.
That's a difficult question. It's a personal question, right? So you're right. So let's talk about, first of all, the ways to get pets, or some of the ways at least, right? So the typical ways are, folks that are specific to a breed that might want and maybe they would go to a rescue or a Doberman rescue because they want to rescue a dog, right? And that's fine. And it really is a personal choice. There is really no right or wrong. It depends on how you look at the pet in your life, in your household. And that's really the first question that I have to back up on, is the first mistake, right? So the first mistake is when people say, "I want to have a pet," regardless if it's a dog or cat, keep the two primary categories. 67% of Americans have those today in the United States. The question becomes is that what is the right pet for the household, and what is the right breed for the household? That's never asked. And that's essentially the first mistake, because if you're going to go after, I'm talking about Dobermans now, I have no idea why, but if you're going to go after the Doberman and you live in a Miami Beach apartment that's 600 square feet large, this dog requires lots of running. So each breed of animal has a purpose. And to start out as a pet owner, my first advice would say, understand the breed, understand what you're looking for in your lifestyle. If you have an active lifestyle, if you have kids in the house, you got to really understand the breed and how it fits in those lifestyles, because most people don't. What they do is they go and say either they like an animal because of how it looks, or they go down a different track, right? And at that point, that's where it becomes disastrous, because they don't know what they're getting themselves involved in. And essentially, if you're getting a French bulldog, it's a vacuum cleaner. So if you have kids, it's going to be sucking up Legos all day long, and you're going to be going and getting surgeries on the stomach that are $4,000 a pop.
See, yeah. Kevin, it was a great question.
No, and a great point. I see people walking their huskies here, and like, they're beautiful dogs, but I just feel terrible when they're outside in August going on a walk, and the dog just looks like, "Please take me north." It's tough, but yeah. And I know Jason really appreciates that answer as well. That's actually why he doesn't have a pet.
Yes.
It's because he's walking in the woods and like looking for a pet. He swims every morning, looks in the pool, no pets there. So
I got pet iguanas, Kevin. They're in my pool.
Yes.
Every day I go to it, there's more poop on it. I don't know what side it's on.
All right, so I got a question for you. You know a lot about the pet space. So does your wife. So you've got a ton of information out there. What is a hot new product? Something that maybe most people aren't aware of. Maybe they were even at your recent conference, but something that maybe most pet owners don't know about. They're just new and seems really cool.
So there is a lot of always cool developing products in the space, because it is evolving very quickly. And especially on, the leashes and the collars, you'll see the evolution of collars going into these smart collars, because that's essentially following the track of like the human, smart watches, right? But what I would say, everyone should suspect is that in the next couple of years, you're going to see the houses become more automated to supporting the ease of the lifestyle of the pet, measuring the food, the water, the pet's weight, and things that, you don't necessarily understand as a pet owner early on, but as you're researching it, it becomes like, oh, I didn't think about this. I didn't realize that my dog is 30 pounds overweight and that's why it's got diabetes and these other issues. Pets are almost identical to humans in a way, right? And that's something that we talk about in a lot in our discussions, but you're going to see a lot of that evolution take place. We just, launched at the event on Friday, this blood test analyzer, and you would say, well, that's kind of not a product for the consumer, right? But in reality, it is, right? Because today, as a pet owner, both of you would be considered elevated pet owners because you don't own a pet, because you both have busy lifestyles. So your choice of not having a pet is actually a right choice, because the responsibility of having a pet is critical. And especially we'll talk about pets on campus, because this is a really hot topic for me. Pets are moving on campuses, on college campuses, in dorm rooms, and you have this emotional support animal, and you have a service dog animal. So a lot of stuff is evolving, but the reality of it is that at the core foundation, owners are looking for the next generation cool device that they want to put on their animal to learn. And these blood test analyzers, whereas blood work was only given to the vet, you would do nothing with it. You would think of it as your vet is upselling you a sales ticket, $400 to do blood work on your animal. But in reality, if you were able to get blood work that would tell you about your animal and explain to you, oh, look, your animal's prone to cancer. So did you know you could feed broccoli stems and blueberries that you're throwing in the garbage right now? You can actually put it as toppings on the animal, which has antioxidants and will reduce, inflammatory issues. That's what's kind of evolving, if that makes sense. So the blood analyzer is a new thing that's coming out that you'll hear about. That's going to change a lot of the medical practice, and that's on more of a tech side. But we have a lot of cool products, and Barkera's got an e-commerce shop. Obviously, I have an e-commerce background that, in its today's state, is more brand focused, but in its future state is going to be more niche product focused, to introducing inventor type or custom type of products that you would not find at a Chewy or a Petco, because they're more standardized. If that makes sense.
Okay, let's talk about the experts on your platform, because I run a platform, Owl, and one of the most difficult things is getting good quality experts, and they want to get paid a lot of money, right? They don't look at it as just, well, I'll get opportunities from the conversations on Owl. They're like, well, I need to have those conversations plus some, right? So you talked about one-on-one conversations and really being the advisor. So what is the hottest way you're going to go about getting these experts? Is it just pure paying them, or is there a specific way you're going to collaborate with them to keep costs down? And I think a lot of businesses kind of go down this model that you're going down, and they tend to fail because they can't figure that part out.
Yeah, especially that the service component of it.
Yeah,
a lot of times, I mean, some of that's evolving too. You've mentioned a number of examples here on the show, but if I run a veterinary clinic, most of my business is constrained to a specific geographic area, for the most part. Certainly, I'm sure that's evolving as well, but that's a great question, Jason.
thank you, Kevin.
So it is a great question.
I had to come back after my first one.
Yeah. So there's a couple components to that. So one is that in any business, having a good client, which is the pet owner, means a lot to any business, because having a bad client or an inefficient client costs the business money. So if there's a shortage on vets, and the majority of people bringing their animals to a vet, 80% of the things that they're bringing their pet to the vet for can be proactively solved in the household. One would say, oh, maybe that's going to impact the vet in a negative way. But the other way to look at it is, maybe we're making the veterinarians more efficient so they can focus on the things that you need to bring your animal to the vet, like a surgery or something of nature, right? So that's one piece to keep in mind. Now, on the bigger scale of things, how do we source our experts? And that's actually one of the things in the Barkera IP. So in the IP of how we structure an expert, you could technically be an expert if you could teach your dog if you mastered on teaching your dog how to sit, and you could train teach your animal how to sit, as an example, there's different levels of expertise, and that could go from anything from a local level all the way to a global level, right? Because there's different people that, offer things that, somebody might want to gain insight on. So we have an IP, and every piece of content that Barkera produces has that IP behind it, so that you as the owner know that this has been sourced from X resource, right? Which is something that's very important to validate, because today I think we all get caught up on listening to somebody on social media, and then immediately we're taking a position not knowing if they're even real or not, in this case. So the second piece of it, how is that interesting enough in the pet industry that I've seen, and I've never seen this in any other industry, is I tested this in front of a group of lawyers. I was at a conference, and I was speaking on a panel with 500 lawyers. And I asked how many people have a cat or dog, please raise your hand. 50% of them raised your hand. And I spoke out loud and said, all you guys are going to work for free for me. And that was a pretty ballsy statement to make, in front of a room of lawyers that are high dollar paid professionals. I wasn't saying it sarcastically. I was actually saying it with meaning, because I knew that the animal is the key to their heart, and it breaks down the business barrier. And today Barkera has almost 45 people on the Barkera team that not one of them are asking for anything from the company in its earliest stage. Not to say that we would want to not, cultivate that, and we will over time. But interesting in the pet industry is that we have Six Sigma black belt individuals that are in corporate America. Everyone's helping out because animals can't speak. And if you have an animal, you kind of get it, you kind of stand behind it. So it hasn't been a problem for us to source, various experts that are passionate about that particular industry, and being able to speak out, whatever knowledge they have to an audience. They just don't have the conduit to do so. And now we're providing that conduit.
Okay, so you believe that they'll have so much passion behind it that they'll do webinars, Zoom training type things, or even one-on-ones, and they're not going to be so concerned about getting paid for educating that individual.
Correct. Early on. Now, over time, obviously, you're going to have certain expertise on our advisory teams, and that's how we're structured. Because again, our Barkera is a neutral platform, so we're not going to take a position on two dog behaviorists taking two contradictory positions, if that makes sense. It would be in our best interest to have both of them actually discuss it on the platform, and then it's up to the pet owner to decide what's right for them. And that's really what we're trying to sustain. But eventually there is a monetization model where seasoned experts that are obviously evolving with Barkera would obviously get compensated to whatever expertise they're adding in.
And funding wise, is it self-funded? Did you raise capital for it?
So Barkera is 100% self-funded to date, and has been built, through those mechanisms. And we will go to a funding model in 2025 and start roadshowing it. My methodology is probably contradictory to what would be taught in schools. I tend to look at building out the foundation of a company, building out the product set, building out, the right expertise and teams, and then having all of this together working and generating revenue, and then bringing it to the table. Because my belief is at that point, the value is a lot more, and I'm more interested in strategic investors than I'm interested in the money.
I think that's how a lot of the successful ones actually do it, regardless of how it's, it's spoken about in books or texts or at mentorship programs, because most angels and VCs want to see traction, right? They want to see data, and you've taught that. And when we look at the stats, I mean, Kevin knows this, like he sees the stats all the time. It's like, how many of the ones that don't have what he's saying get funding, right? You have to typically be a second time founder, know someone, but most of these brands, including Owl, right? Like I'm everywhere on social media, right? But how many times does someone knock on my door? It doesn't happen. You always have to be the one to go out and talk to people, go to networking events, and bring it up in conversations to even have the conversation.
And you mentioned it earlier about like crossing T's and dotting I's, like down to the finite tooth of the parking space you mentioned of just getting here.
Yeah.
That's a great example to us. We don't want to produce crap, so if I'm going to stand in front of somebody that's going to be putting their time or their money or their experience, I want to be able to show them a great solution, a product. And not only that, I want to show it at as what we can do to as close as an enterprise model as possible, because then it shows real confidence behind the brand. And Barkera is a brand. We're not going to go away. We started with building the brand first before anyone even knew who we were.
I want to touch on one subject. What's hot about Liquid PC, right? You're the president of it, and you're talking about bootstrapping this business. And I think we skipped over that. Your background in tech and how you're able to do this, because lots of folks like myself, right? I went from financial advisor, still am today, to creating Owl, a tech platform. I had to go out and hire developers, right, and really have faith in working with those developers to have the app that we have today and consistently just run with it, right? Go with my gut, go with my intuition on what I was doing based on the data that was coming over, or feedback verbally, because I would speak to people on Owl directly and say, hey, what should I do? But you seem to have a lot of this background. We haven't really touched on it. So what's hot about Liquid PC?
Yeah, and I want to just touch on, giving thanks to Citrix to lead into Liquid UPC, because it was an important play, and I can't stress it enough. When you walk through the journey of business and entrepreneurship, my ears have always been open. I listen to everybody. I listen to everyone that has expertise in what industry they know. I was fortunate enough at my tail end of Citrix that I've been one to always look at anytime somebody says something's impossible, I'm like, no, it's not. I shut down A1A. We can talk about that offline, but when anything can be done in this world that's feasibly can be done. And in a corporate world, my goal was, what could I do that's going to really throw off a $9 billion corporation? That's really how I thought. And what I did is I introduced the business to business e-commerce channel, which is a channel for a major company. And they were a partner centric company. They didn't want to talk about selling direct. They were like, Scott, you're fired. There's a door. But when you're able to show a solution to a problem, and they're looking at it at face value, but there's something a lot deeper beyond the face value, what you do is you wind up getting alliances. And that single moment is what allowed me to understand all the divisions, because I had to have 27 department heads sign off on my e-commerce project. By doing that, it was my job to learn a little bit about accounting, a little bit about embargo, a little bit about law, and all these different entities, which then helped me form Liquid UPC, because we covered the gamut about those pillars that I mentioned earlier on, about every struggle that every company has, right? And Liquid UPC has been around since 2010, and we've helped out many businesses in South Florida that are still our clients today. Typically, old school companies that just simply couldn't move from, current state back office, slow operations on paper to digital operation, to, modern day businesses that are well oiled, but they need that refinement, right?
Just explain it to our audience a tad more. Just like when you say you helped old school businesses,
Transmission shop doing $4 million a year. Great. Been around for 50 years, but they're seeing their revenue drop because they have absolutely no web experience, and they're not placed. They have no Google reviews. And obviously their clients are looking on Google searches. So that's a very simple thing. That's a missed opportunity.
The foundation of the digital exposure for this business,
right?
All the way from a website to a shopping cart.
Correct.
To
CRM, invoicing, payment processing, the whole lead system, of how you gather a lead and convert it.
Sure.
The fundamental elements exist in almost every industry. And what happens is that you're not, businesses tend to overlook or not understand how to do it collectively. So we come into those businesses and talk less about technology and more about listening to the owner and the businesses, and what are your struggles? Where are your challenges? Are you inefficient with your staff? How can we create greater efficiency? And then we will apply the technology from the front end, which is, you mentioned the website, to the back.
So are you overlapping both businesses right now? Like, do the employees at one business kind of touch this business, or are you keeping them separate?
Liquid UPC is the development firm behind Barkera.
Gotcha.
So that allowed us to utilize Liquid UPC resources to develop the technical elements of Barkera. Of course, with my connections, both corporate and outside, I have a broad connection base in the business industry and branding and everything else. And that's helped it evolve it. But today, Liquid UPC is still running. I'm very selective on the clients, because there's a right client for the business. And there's also a wrong client. There's a client that just is used to shopping and wants something inexpensively. They're not thinking about the strategy. And I always would say, and I'd leave on this note, is your technical investments in any business are an asset of the company. And if you don't do that wisely, then what happens is that you're going to be inefficient long scale. How could Barkera onboard legally 40 individuals on our team, experts for this event that we just had. We recruited 7 to 9 experts in over a week, and they had to go through the Barkera process, and it wasn't an easy process, meaning they have to submit their resume. We got to validate them. They got to interview. They got to, go through an agreement stage, non-disclosures. I mean, there's a process, and I'm very finicky about those processes because I know early on that stuff comes back to bite you as you hockey stick a company, right? I've been through it.
Yeah, no, couldn't say it better myself.
Well, Scott, we're going to take a quick commercial break to hear from one of our sponsors. When we get back, we're going to jump into our Plead the Fifth segment of the show.
Step into our state-of-the-art innovation lab and create your digital future. Oz uses cutting-edge technology and 22 years of industry knowledge to enhance customer experience through digital innovation in a variety of expertise. Oz is a leading global consulting company whose services and solutions are trusted by startup, midsize, and even Fortune 500 companies. Get to know more about Oz's Salus, a mobile solution bringing us back to max capacity, and their latest solution, Rainmaker, saving insurance companies years of work. To learn more about Oz and their exciting technologies, visit followoz.com. That's FOLLOWOZ.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Shrimp Tank. That was the commercial by Oz. Oz is actually the builder of the Owl app. So if you need a technology solution, of course, that does complex apps like Owl, go ahead and reach out to them. They're local in Fort Lauderdale. Okay, Scott, this segment of the show is called Plead the Fifth, right? I think you know about it. A lot of our past guests talk about it all the time. We try to get our guests to say, I plead the fifth without getting out of the studio, all right? And if you plead the fifth 2 times, we cannot air your episode. That's the rule. Kevin makes the rules, not me. He's the director at the Adams Center here. Okay, so Scott, let's talk about, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a competitor, right? We got Kevin is the lead instructor over at the FU Tech Runway, right? And then you're a mentor, correct? At the Logvin Center of Innovation, which I was part of Owl.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be an easy one to get him to plead the fifth, Kevin. Let's say, what is the worst mentor over at the Logvin Center of Innovation that you've seen go through it? Name the person, or you don't want to name them. Say I plead the fifth.
Well, facilitators. So to correction, facilitators facilitate the different cohorts from ideate to accelerate, right? So, and my role there early on has been that actually my daughter goes to NSU, and it was all a fluke, to be honest. It was a fluke because we were driving down during high school, down University Drive, and I said, do you want to check out a university? And before you know it, she got a scholarship, and I happened to look at the library, and I knew nothing about the Center of Innovation at the time, and I looked up, and I'm like, what is that stuff going up there?
Pretty cool.
Went up there and knocked on a door, and then all of a sudden the magic happened. So, from a standpoint of who's the worst or best mentor there, unfortunately, believe it or not, I haven't been exposed to
good answer.
The other mentors there from left to right.
That's okay. It's not a problem at all. Same question. I know you're a mentor at the VMT. What about there?
So the VMT folks, I don't formally mentor for them, but I have mentored the same folks as them. Right.
Oh.
So I would say that, I know many of those individuals. A lot of them are Citrix folks, which are great because they're starting to be going over there. I'm like, what are you guys doing over the corporate world? Can't you go stay back in the corporate world? And, you don't know the entrepreneur world, but I would say there's more good mentors. I really don't have a bad mentor.
No, I was half joking. I know the group, and they have a great informal process for kind of validating and verifying. So I think everybody, they all have, probably different strengths and weaknesses, but all pretty, very solid, I should say, kind of mentors.
Oh, you guys are being nice.
Well, hold on.
There's always one that sneaks in by accident.
I'm not fully done yet there. So
always one that sneaks in somehow, fake it until you make it.
No.
Come on.
But here's the thing. So what I would say, though, is the evolution of these types of programs, the challenge as a facilitator and being heavily involved and a passionate entrepreneur is not seeing the left to the right of the program. And that's one of the things I brought to the attention of the center is it would be great to see, the kind of program itself and the trajectory. So I know how my piece complements those other folks in their lineup. But also a lot of times I take a position because you'll have the marketeer that's talking about marketing. And of course they have a possibly as, secondary agenda to obviously sell marketing services to the entrepreneurs. And then you have the lawyer come in right after that, and the lawyer puts a scare on. Now, if you don't get this contract written right, you're going to jail, and then I just come in and say, guys, how much is your budget? You got $5K. You haven't sold anything yet. Are you going to give it to the lawyer, write a great contract that no one's ever going to see because you have no clients? You're going to give it to the marketeer that it's going to start fueling the company when you have no website or foundation. So I'm more about pragmatically thinking about what are the stepping stones that you need as an entrepreneur, and then getting the right resources and mentorships to fuel it.
Okay, so I have a finance question then. So I'm not going to make you answer the exact amount, because you talk a lot about, building the correct foundation first before, raising capital and really putting your time in and having patience, where I find a lot of entrepreneurs don't have that type of money, right? They tend to, do a little bit, like maybe a small MVP, right? But they realize like it's not practical. They just don't have the funding from another source, or they're working a 9 to 5 and they just don't have the time, right? So how much have you spent so far? 0 to 250, option A. 250 to 1 million. That would be B. C would be 1 million at 2 million, and D would be 2 million plus. A, B, C, or D, or plead the fifth.
Not pleading the fifth. So the funny thing about your question, and I'm surprised you didn't really qualify your question, is that you didn't talk about sweat equity versus actual dollars out of the pocket. So
out of your own pocket, you bootstrap.
Okay.
Out of your own pocket.
Out of my own pocket.
How much? No sweat equity. Everyone could claim like the company Liquid UPC has put in $1 million of effort, right? But like real dollars, like how much have you actually spent? A, B, C, or D based on those levels, or plead the fifth.
So give me the levels again if you don't mind, please.
This is like politics over here. 0 to 250 would be A. 250 to 1 million would be B. 1 million to 2 million would be C. And then over 2 million of your own money would be D.
I would say between the 250 and 1 million mark is where we're at.
B.
Okay.
He answered B.
And I think that's a reasonable amount, being smart with the spend. So that way you're not overspending too much, but you're also having the control to build it correctly the way you want to build it. Now, mind you, I have the experience too. So a lot of entrepreneurs don't have that. You made a good point. Yeah. They come from corporate America. They have a great MVP or product or service. And that's where everyone focuses on. You see it probably in your cohorts all day long. They focus on that. But to be honest, I believe that every entrepreneur, if they don't have 10K, starting out, whatever they're starting out, to invest in the company itself, not the product or service, then I start questioning, how are you going to get to the next level? 5 to 10K is minimum. You need something, because you can get an entire ecosystem of technology behind you yourself to run your business as a single solo entrepreneur for $37 a month today. You might not have it all configured. You might need somebody that has the expertise to do it, like Liquid UPC, and maybe Liquid UPC is willing to do it for a couple $1,000 to get you going, right? But the reality is, it is doable. But the problem is that if you're approached by all these different entities, marketing services, and every service is 5K a pop, it goes back to, what is your strategic plan to getting to the next step? And that's the missing point that a lot of folks miss, is what does your roadmap look like? The same thing with legal. You can talk to legal all day long. What is your legal strategy? Most entrepreneurs don't know what a legal strategy even is. So, but those are the things that you need to think about first. So then you can line up your finances that you have that's privately invested, along with your resources and your connections to actually make something evolve over time.
Yeah, I think you both make kind of really good points about some myths and kind of misnomers about entrepreneurship. About a decade and a half ago, it was really all this kind of lean startup stuff became popular out of Southern California. And it really, some aspects of it, I still employ today, many actually. It is very much more of kind of a scientific approach to figuring out, do you even really have a value proposition? Is there something there? Kind of the fundamentals. Should you build anything at all? Right? Which is another problem when people just build things and then try to figure out how to do it later. But at the same time, too much of the lean aspects of that, I think, were kind of adopted. The kind of mindset that, like, well, we can start with like next to nothing, completely bootstrapped, a lot of cheap web services. We can grab a domain, we can get up on Shopify, we got a business. And it's like,
No.
not exactly, right? Like,
why is an entrepreneur building their own website? Why is an entrepreneur doing that? And that's the first thing I usually question is that do you know what you're doing, or you're just well, we're on Wix, we're paying $9. Well, okay, so when you walk into a business meeting and you give them your Wix website that looks like shit, excuse my language, then it's something that's your first introduction. That's your first date. That's not going to do you right in the business world. Today's business world is much different than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
20 years ago, when I was selling web conferencing, believe it or not, we were still developing the platform while we were IPO and selling it, and it was evolving. And I'd walk into a company like Citrix, and with 4 colored pencils, I'd draw on a sheet of paper saying, this is what it's going to do for your company and solve it. Give me $1 million. And they'd be like, okay, here's $1 million. But today you're getting so scrutinized by the business, community that, if you're walking into a business and your best asset is that innovative idea that you have just a product or service, and that's all you're really good at, then your strategy has to be finding another business that would basically adopt that for you, because you're not going to be able to learn. I see all these entrepreneurs going through the cohort thinking they're going to learn business overnight. And I'm like, and they quit their day job. I'm like, I know how hard it is knowing business and being an entrepreneur, let alone not knowing business and jumping into the Shark Tank. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, and it does take some money, some real money. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in most cases to really have a real infrastructure. Not depending on your skill set and what it is, and whether it's a service or if it's really designed to scale or not. It may be among the low multiple of tens of thousands, but it's not nothing.
It's not nothing, and it's not ego, because you mentioned ego in the beginning, and so many people are just so either burned out with their current job, and then they jump into this whole entrepreneurial fun bucket of entertainment, and they're like, I'm going to be a billionaire overnight. And I'm like, well, show us how. It's just not that easy. So, that ego brings somebody to a very far side, and they tend to forget about everything evolves over time. A baby doesn't just come out and start running, right? You got to kind of crawl, walk, run. And that's how business is. And you got to be able to know what your skills are and know what they're not. And if you don't have those skills, if you don't know finance, if you don't know legal, you better go find somebody that does. And you got to be able, some relationship and networking. Their platform is brilliant because it's bringing people together and that, to network. And that's critical today. Absolutely critical.
Yeah. And on a more positive note, when we talk about kind of like you need some money, many listeners may be out there being like, well, I don't have $10,000, let alone more tens of thousands. Well, from a more positive perspective, there are ways and resources to kind of access some capital. And one of the things I'm often talking about with new founders, particularly if they're very much into the scientific and innovation space, right? Non-dilutive funding, right? These competitions to a lesser extent, but more so grants, specifically federal, right? That support. So we're talking about SBIRs and STTRs. They're not for everything, but if you are suited for those types of initiatives, that funding's non-dilutive and can sort of get you going.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, and centers such as yourself and Broward Center, all these different institutions offer those types of elements to gain funding, and it's just a good thing. You just got to go want it. You got to search for it. You got to be hungry to go after it.
Yeah. So I'm going to try to get him to plead the fifth, Kevin, and go back to a finance question. Okay. So, if you raise capital, they're really not going to want you to be a president of 2 companies, right? So tell us that magic number that you would require to walk away from Liquid UPC, right? You have a lot of employees over there that might not want to hear this number, right? So it might be best to plead the fifth, right? But is there a special number in mind? Is it 3 million, 5 million, 8 million? And be realistic. Obviously, anyone could say $100 million, right? But like, what is that number that you need to do this full time, because any investor is not going to want to see you, running both brands. And I get that asked all the time with Owl and my financial service.
Sure,
company.
fine. So there's two perspectives. One is that Liquid UPC would either be, owned by Barkera at some point, which is a strategic play potentially, because Barkera has an entire technical side to it. So therefore,
they would be the developers.
That would be the developers in the lineup that would continue on that journey, and that is a potential play if it doesn't just get sold off by itself. And there are clients today that are, I would say, early on clients that are between both companies. Now, the second part of that is that Liquid UPC is not, Barkera is not for sale. So why would I go out and try to position this company in its early states today when we first started it? If a company like this is successful in its future, we're not talking, we're talking a company that's a movement. So when you talk about movements, that's a very odd thing to talk about, because most businesses don't think of themselves as creating change or creating an evolution over time of people's mindset. If we are able to pull off, the expertise panel and become that trusted advisor in the pet owner's journey, I can pretty much say that, we're going to well be in the hundreds of millions, if not billions at some point. And I'm not saying that as
you would be the type of brand that would raise capital. That's why I'm going there. Most
100%.
tech companies, like if it works and the recurring revenue's coming in, the profits there, yes, you could say I'm going to keep bootstrapping this business, but let's face the reality that like these businesses then require capital.
100%.
Right. And you want to pour as much capital into marketing and sales and skyrocket the numbers to get up to $1 billion of revenue.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
And you need strategic partners.
Which means like that question, going back to my original question, is like there's a number, right? Because at that point you're like, okay, our revenue is doing $1 million bootstrapped, let's say, right? And at that point you're like, look at the data. We can now raise 10 million, 20 million. What is that number for you? Because the people that are employed at Liquid UPC might be, of course, realizing like, wait, they're going to keep that department, not the full department potentially, or the whole thing, right? Or it's going to separate, right? Or you don't want to answer that. Just say, I plead the fifth.
Not going to happen. But I basically, first of all, people that offer value don't get booted out of a company,
Sure.
and typically, and I don't,
Absolutely.
And with the exception of sometimes in the bigger companies in corporate America, when you're just forced to make, strategic moves, and you just have to, from employee shifts, that's a different conduit. But, as far as, our bigger effort is it's less about the money. It's more about the objective of getting the right strategic partners to gain the element, to support these folks along the way. There's no way that Barkera's team today would be able to create this change. Let's be real about that.
Gotcha. So you're not interested about 5 million versus 10 million. It's like you take 5 million over the 10 because that's the right strategic partner, because it's the mindset. It's the mindset.
It's got to be the mindset, and the mindset's got to live, because if it doesn't, then basically at the end of the day, money is great, but it doesn't buy happiness, and
Sure.
in my world at least, and it just complements it. And and we're about creating that foundational mindset. If we can find the right strategic partners, obviously the only way we'll be able to do this, to answer your question in a better way, is we need strategic investors.
Yeah.
We need the right people, and the best part of that story is that when you talk to you mentioned grants and things of that nature. When you go after, one of the scientists on our team does cancer research for humans.
Yeah.
And it was a funny conversation. He's like, yeah, we just got $1 million in cancer research. He's like, but if you can get me a cancerous dog, we'll get 5 million. So humans spend more money on their animals than they do themselves. So therefore, having that mindset that exists today, that's not something we created. It's just something that's real. Yeah. People know that in the industry, and to get those types of people behind it is what's going to really make the change happen at Barkera.
Community in a nutshell.
100%.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thanks for joining us here on the Shrimp Tank today. Final words. I know you wanted to bring up the STEM kit that is being shown in the video, and where can people find yourself, your brand? So
thank you very much. Yeah. So we did an early release this year of 2 products. One is this one up on the table up there. It's a veterinary STEM kit. It's for, the youngsters at the age of 7+. So I'd say between 7 and 12. If you ask kids, what job do you want to do when you grow up? Most kids answer, I want to be a veterinarian because they like animals. It's just a common thing. STEM kits exist today. Parents know this. They can go on Amazon and buy it. So from that perspective, there's nothing unique about it. But from the perspective of how we created it, we partnered up with Without Walls EDU, and she's a Broward County school STEM teacher that teaches other teachers STEM. And we basically created this kit that has, you build your own stethoscopes and sutures, real life things you learn in the career in the kit. But when you're done with the kit, you go through an immersive experience online that takes the kid inevitably through what a veterinary hospital looks like, meeting real life vets. And what we're going to wind up doing once we get a certain number of kits sold is we're going to introduce them to a live vet streams. So a kid at the age of 7 to 12 can meet industry experts and really get passionate about, because that spark at that young age is what creates change. And that's what it did it for me. Yeah. And that's what we're all about there. And the last thing is we have the Elevated Pet Owner's Guide, and this covers foundational pet ownership on nutrition, health, behavior, and grooming. If you're a seasoned pet owner or a new pet owner, this is what's missing. Especially you go to the shelters or rescues, they don't give you the handbook. Here's your handbook. Barkerashop.com, or just go to barkera.com. You'll find the e-commerce shop, and we're going to be selling both of these on the store.
Well, Scott, thanks again for joining us here on the Shrimp Tank. Everybody listening, call him on Owl next week. Go ahead and connect with him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and reach on out. Take care. We'll be back next Wednesday, right around 1 o'clock. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Yep.
Like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. When it's